Good morning. Before we begin the public hearing, I will make the following announcement. Due to the continuing threat to public health from COVID-19, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come. Mr. Golden, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance will please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Also, say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on screen when you speak. Mr. Golden?
Councilman Johnson. Pardon me, I was muted. Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I am present.
Councilmember Jones.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, viewing public, I am present.
Councilmember Vaughn. Vice Chair Squilla.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and colleagues present.
And Chair Driscoll.
Present. Thank you. A quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing is now called to order. This is the public hearing of the Committee on Licenses and Inspection regarding resolution number 230112. Mr. Golden, will you please read the title of the resolution?
Resolution number 230112. Authorizing the Committee on Licenses and Inspections to hold hearings examining the impact of new regulations on short-term rental markets in Philadelphia.
Thank you. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in this meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for the questions or comments they have for the witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. Mr. Golden, will you please call the first panel we have to testify this morning on resolution number 230112?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Thomas would like to be recognized before we move into the panels.
Councilmember Thomas?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members of this committee for allowing me to grace you with my presence and join us.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, Councilmember.
We're looking at this issue from the perspective of what has come to us as it relates to concerns based on what we've tried to do. We know that there's been huge issues in the city of Philadelphia as it relates to Airbnbs, and not just Philadelphia, but really all across the country. And as legislators, we've tried our best to find that fine balance between regulating what needs to exist to make sure that neighborhoods stay safe while simultaneously allowing people to do business in the city of Philadelphia. As council members, we talk all the time about what does it mean to grow business and to put people in a position to make Philadelphia a little more business friendly, to address issues like poverty and lack of entrepreneurship. And at the end of the day, this is one of those industries that's is new, is innovative, is constantly changing. And as government, we're trying our best to keep up with where we're going as it relates to what's happening, not just here in the city of Philadelphia, but how industries across the country are essentially changing. So I commend my colleagues and this legislative body, as always, for the willingness to listen to the concerns of individuals who are in the industry. And I always appreciate the flexibility and willingness to have a conversation, to be able to figure out what is the best means moving forward to serve the people of the city of Philadelphia. So I just wanted to say thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me a little bit of gratitude to talk about the purpose behind the introduction of this resolution and the reason that we're having this conversation today. And with all that's going on, on the official side and on the other side, I appreciate people taking the time to listen to the concerns of folks who are telling us that we need to hear what they have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And of course, thank you, colleagues. I appreciate all you have done. And I also want to just recognize Councilmember Squilla as well. It's been a pleasure to work with him and his team as it relates to this issue to be able to figure out what is the best means of moving forward. So thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Thomas and Councilmember Squilla, for your efforts on this very important issue. Mr. Golden?
Mr. Chair, the first panel are the owners and operators, and those members are Angela Romero, Jessica Burke, and Ramir Williams.
Good morning. Are you connected and ready to proceed?
Yes,
Good morning.
good morning, Council.
So whoever's going to go first, then please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning, Council. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share my experience. My name is Angela Romero. I'm a District 1. And first, I kind of wanted to share a little bit more about my background. I'm a first-generation college student. I'm a Latina, and I moved from Colombia to the States, excuse me, when I was 19. I spend a lot of my time cleaning houses and, studying at night, excuse me. And I finally was able to graduate from my degree, get somewhat of a corporate job, so I can start saving, so I eventually could start my own business down the line. I love Philadelphia. It's a very vibrant city. I love diversity, has a lot of things to offer. I figured this would be a great place to kind of set roots. My boyfriend also lives here, and I wanted to start a short-term rental business. I love hospitality. I love hosting people and sharing all the beautiful things that the city has to offer. And so what I did was I invested pretty much my life savings into buying an apartment, a building, so like a triplex here in the East Kensington area, which is a developing area, as you're all aware. The apartment was very run down outside. There was, a lot of people just doing drugs and things like that. After I remodeled the apartment, put cameras, put lights, the apartment no longer has that. It really lit up this corner. And I was able to operate my short-term rental business for the last 6 months before the ordinance. And I think for me, it really represented an opportunity for economic empowerment. Obviously, I don't come from money. I know wealth that my family gave me. So being able to be economically empowered and being able to have access to that wealth that I've been locked out generationally for. That, and the also is that I do have to provide for my family. And so being able to, or my mom specifically, so being able to, have my small business to help support her was really great. I do have to say I did go into debt to buy some things like furniture and things like that. So I do have that debt, and I have student debt as well. And so I think, when I was operating, there was a lot of good things that I brought to the community. So I employed 5 people, anywhere from contractors to cleaning staff. And I was able to bring people to the East Kensington community that would bring tourism dollars, because I had a little booklet essentially that brought, I said, I had recommendations of where to go, and all my guests loved going to the local places. So I was not only bringing tourism dollars, but also kind of changing the face of this neighborhood. Because to be honest, a lot of the people that were in the South East Kensington would message me and be like, hey, is the area safe? Should I even go there? And I was like, yeah, this area is safe. Come come over, you'll have a great time. And at the end, they did have a great time, and they wanted to come back. And I think, as Councilman Thomas was saying, I think I commend Mr. Councilman Squilla for regulation or in leading this regulation. I think we need regulation because it's the lack of regulation that has allowed the bad actors, which community people don't want, but also we as business owners don't want either, because they gave us a bad, reputation, which we don't want, right? I think the way it was rolled out has made it very difficult to do business. It has been very confusing every time I go to LNI. They give me kind of like a different thing to do, and so I've kind of been sent out for a spin. I tried to start getting my regulation, like my licenses back in the middle of last year. I was told I needed to get a limited lodge-in license when I actually needed to get a visitor accommodation license. So I spent a whole good 6 months believing that I had the right license when I actually didn't. When I realized that I didn't, I went and tried to get another license, which was the limited lodging, which is different. And then I wasn't told that I needed to file this appeal with the CBA, and so that expired. My license, my process expired because I couldn't file the appeal. And now that I understand the whole process, it's essentially the process that a developer has to go to build a new condo, right? Like I was yesterday in one of the prep community meetings for the community meeting, and they were asking me if I had plans for my property, if I had a lawyer, if I had a marketing and a presentation. And I'm not a large scale developer that can kind of, come up with all these resources to do all this stuff. And in addition to that, I've had to shut down now because I don't have this license. And I've had debt, the debt that I talked about that I went into to start my business. I have all of those obligations that are essentially, making it very difficult for me now. I'm in the process of looking for a job because now I don't know if I can start this business again down the line, right? So I think it's just the CMX3 part just makes it very difficult because we have to go through the zoning board approval, which I started the process again middle of last year. Finally was able to understand the process at the end of last year, and now my hearing is in September, at the end of September. So theoretically, I have to be off, not operating from a whole year. So I can't just wait around and see what's going to happen to see even if I get approved. I have bills to pay, and so it's just been kind of crushing, honestly, because I was very excited to start my own business. And I was doing really well. It was great reviews. People loved it. It was awesome. And I think what is hard is the CMX3. And obviously, you guys are regulators. Best. But what my view is that because it's making it so hard for people to get this license, I have heard also from other people that it took them 7-8 months. It's preventing or deterring people to actually wanting to go through the process because they hear this kind of horror stories of the people who are trying to do it. They're well, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to operate in the gray area, right? And then that, I think the inadvertent consequences that you're going to get the bad operators in that gray area too. So if we could make it easier for everyone to get licensed, but also make it harder, if you have an issue once you get your license revoked, that way everyone will make sure that everyone will understand that they're going to be held to a high standard of quality, which we all want. I think that might be a lot easier. That being said, I know I have spoken with Councilman Squilla before about the situation because I'm in a financial need where I was hey, I need to pay my debt and I don't have any money. How do I do this? And he has been willing to work with me and find a solution. So that's all to say that I do feel like we're all trying to do the right thing, and I did wanted to commend Councilman Squilla for his willingness to hear me out and support me also trying to find a solution for my case.
Thank you for your testimony, Angela.
Thank you.
Do we have the next testifier?
I'm happy to go next if that's.
You're recognized, Jessica.
Good morning, council members. My name is Jessica Burke. My husband, Robert Burke, is trying to be on the call as well. Although he's in Philadelphia for work this week, he's actually staying at our house that we're hoping to continue to use as a short-term rental. And I'm in Colorado where we live with our family, so we'll be on different Zoom screens. Our property is located in Representative Johnson's district, District 2, near Fittler Square. Thank you for allowing us to share our experience as short-term rental owners and our experience attempting to remain compliant with the current legislation. First, being able to use our home as a short-term rental is what has allowed my husband to keep his job in Philadelphia. My husband is a research physician at the Veterans Hospital in Philadelphia, and he's a professor at Penn. We decided to move to Colorado just after the pandemic for family reasons, and we really strategized for ways for Bob to keep the job he loves, working with the vets that he loves, but we knew we could not afford 2 houses on our own, and we definitely cannot afford for him to stay at a hotel every other week to work in Philadelphia. So after careful planning, we purchased a small row home that also needed significant renovations that we calculated we would be able to afford if we rented it out short term for part of each month when Bob is not staying in it. Luckily, things basically worked out as we had planned and hoped. Bob is able to stay there a couple of times each month. He's there every other week, and we rent it out regularly when he's not there. And that has allowed Bob to keep his job in the city, which supports our family. Our neighbors, we have very good relationships with our neighbors, and they've also, in our view, and I think in their view, benefited from our short-term rental. We've had a series of guests who are visiting family or friends in the neighborhood. Housing in Philadelphia is not that cheap, and often you don't have huge places. So we've had a lot of people who live very nearby. We've also had people moving in or out of right around us. It's allowed us to both expand our network within our area, but we've honestly offered a solution to some of their, problems that they're having or whatever. When Representative Squilla began due diligence for the current legislation several years ago, I participated in a Zoom call with him and other short-term rental owners at the time. And my recollection of that meeting is that the goal of the legislation was to create a way to oversee and, most importantly, control problematic rentals. And I recall that most of us were in agreement on that call. Generally, us good hosts don't love bad hosts. Not only do they not give us a great name, but I don't want to live in a community with a party house with no way to reach the owners either. I mention this to point out that there are many people like Bob and I, short-term rental hosts who are in favor of appropriate legislation and regulation of short-term rentals. And we want to be a part of the process, and we want to operate within a fair system. So when the legislation came out, Bob and I began the process of trying to be compliant. We assumed, Angela sort of alluded to this too, we assumed that because Bob lives in the house every other week and we use it as a personal residence, that we would be able to get a limited lodging license. As you likely know, the limited lodging license pathway in the current legislation is for residents to rent their home for up to 6 months a year. However, when we met with L&I, we were told that that did not apply to us because our Philadelphia home is not our primary residence and because we don't have driver's licenses registered at the home, we could not use the limited lodging license pathway. So one change I would encourage in future legislation, if there remains a distinction between limited lodging and visitor accommodation licenses, is to allow homeowners the ability to obtain at least one license and to accept more than one proof of residency. Technically, right now, we could rent out our home full-time to someone else and they could get a limited lodging license and rent short-term. But we, as homeowners who are paying the bills and live there regularly, cannot. So then Bob and I began the process to get the visitor accommodation license, which is the pathway available to the people who aren't able to get the limited lodging license. As you all know, and again, as Angela mentioned, that pathway currently requires you to have a CMX1 zoning or greater. If you don't have this, you need to get a zoning variance approved. And one of the first steps of that process is to go before your local community organization, your RCO, for community approval for the required zoning change. So our meeting was scheduled for last November. We spent a lot of time in September and October talking to our neighbors. We met with them. We explained the situation. They all had an opportunity. I mean, you know the process, but we brought signatures from literally everyone who lives around us, no neighbors opposed, in support of continuing our short-term rental, and we made our case. The decision that the RCO sent us in the mail was that they opposed. They didn't provide a reason. They were not willing to hear our case again after we brought even more signatures from neighbors and asked for reconsideration. So that made me kind of curious, and I dug into the available records at the time of our RCO zoning meetings. There's not a record of them supporting anyone's request ever for a zoning change for a short-term rental. I can't speak to experience with subsequent steps. Our zoning hearing with the city is scheduled for later than this call. But I can say that we have put in countless hours and dollars. We paid the city to have our process expedited. It's still taken, this is coming up on more than a year, to attempt to comply with the current legislation. And we've done this because we have loved sharing our home with visitors to the city, and because honestly, having a short-term rental has allowed my husband to keep his job. We support the idea of regulating short-term rentals in Philadelphia, but we strongly believe that the legislation needs amending. First, we believe that the criteria available for the limited lodging pathway needs to be reevaluated. And most importantly, that the zoning requirements in the current legislation is hugely burdensome, not only on us, also the zoning board. And again, more important even than that, the zoning legislation does nothing to achieve the legislative goal of regulating bad actors. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Oh, thank you very much, Jessica. And who will be our next testifier?
Good morning. My name is Romero Williams, and thank you for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you.
My properties are in District 5. And I just want to give a little background, very brief background on how I got into short-term rentals. It was the pandemic, so 2020, and I was laid off from my job, which I believe probably most people were. And that was very, hard for me at the time. And I was actually able to go back to that job when things were opening back up for the world. And then we got also shut down again. So I lost my job like twice. And I had to, think fast because I have a daughter and a family. So short-term rentals was my answer. So I got into short-term rentals, and it actually has, saved me during that situation, and it's also allowed me to, take care of my family and continue my life on from that situation. And I know Councilman Squilla spoke about residential neighborhood problems as far as it's like parties and other complaints that they may have gotten. Maybe people have gotten shot at Airbnbs, maybe in residential neighborhoods, and which I agree, and we definitely don't want to allow that at all. And like my other partner said, that like no one wants to see that. We want to be held to a high standard, but I do believe that we can have a little bit of common ground when it comes to residential neighborhoods specifically, because I know these laws are attaining to more pushing CMX3 and higher, but residential neighborhoods, there are good things going on in them as well, supporting the local businesses. I've given so many alley oops to like all of the local coffee shops, food trucks, and breweries around me, and they have thanked me so much. Like I have business cards in there, they have business cards at my properties, and it's actually been a good relationship. I personally have a good relationship with people in the neighborhood as well. Like I'm the type of host that I want people to know what's going on. I do not want to run a shady business at all. And since the legislative came in, I actually had to move to more so midterm, because that's what can allow me at the time, like so 31 days and more. And it's been tough because short-term rentals are where the profit margin is. So like my profit margin is kind of like way down, and it's been tough. So if we can try to come to like some sort of common ground, and hopefully I can get you to see that, not just residential neighborhoods are such a big problem. There are good things going on in them as well. And I do believe there should be regulations, but if we can, be in the middle somewhere, that'd be really great. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Ramir. And do we have one more testifier this morning?
That's it for this panel.
For this panel?
Yeah.
I'll open up to questions from council members.
Mr. Chair, this is Councilmember Thomas.
You recognize, Councilman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank this particular panel for their testimony and their willingness to share their experiences, as well as the recommendations. It's very much appreciated. I didn't have any questions for this panel. I thought that they were very detail oriented. They were sharp with their recommendations, and also, the anecdotes help as well too. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank those folks who testified today.
Well, thank you, Councilmember. And I agree with you. Their testimony was very insightful. Hearing no further questions from members of this panel, Mr. Golden, will you please call the second panel we have to testify this morning on Resolution 230112?
The second panel is made up of neighbors and community organizations. Panelists include Jonathan Breaux from the Washington West Civic, Joe Baker from Franklin Bridge North Neighbors, and Matthew Fontana from the CCRA.
Well, good morning. Are you connected and ready to proceed?
I believe so. Can you hear me? Yes, Joe Baker here.
Okay, so whoever's going to go first, please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
I'll go. Joe, you can start. Go ahead. Joe, you can start. Good morning. My name is Joseph Baker. My perspective is as a retired person living in the 1st District. I'm a retired merchant seaman, and I'm here representing the Franklin Bridge North Neighbors Association. Bob Germican, the president of the association, is not available, and he asked me to fill in. The Franklin Bridge North Neighbors Association represents the area roughly from the Benjamin Franklin Bridge north to Callawhill Street and Front Street to 6th Street. Our neighborhood has experienced several problems stemming from the misuse of short-term rentals. There are 50 short-term rental locations within a block of where I am right now. And about 50 yards from where I'm sitting, a new building is planned to contain 110 new short-term rentals with 2 large roof decks. And according to the developer, that building will not have anyone on site full-time. I only see our problems getting worse, not better, unless this industry is regulated and policed. A well-run and regulated short-term rental can exist in a neighborhood such as ours without much notice. But that is not what's happening. What is happening is that we are repeatedly experiencing problems, from the simply annoying things such as putting trash out on the sidewalk on any day of the week, to disruptive and dangerous. That includes loud parties spilling out into the street in the earliest hours of the morning with loud music, shouting, screaming, fights, cars racing the wrong way on 3rd Street, people jumping on cars, and yes, at least 3 times, gunfire. The owners of the problem properties are not responsive, or they are responding to us with "it's not my problem." Our councilman told us that short-term rentals cannot be used as event spaces hosting large groups of partying people, but that is exactly what's happening at the short-term rentals across the street from my building. What are we to do if the city is not responsive? How can we shut down these nuisance properties? We've explained our problems to the police and to our councilmen. We participated in the effort to modify the city ordinance regulating short-term rentals. We were optimistic this January when we saw the new ordinance take effect. So far, we've been disappointed. The problems continue, and there is no clear path to enforcement of the ordinance. People are buying properties strictly for the purpose of using them for short-term rentals. In essence, the city is experiencing an unpleasant dispersal of short-term rental units, I call them hotel rooms, throughout residential neighborhoods. I understand some people feel the modified ordinance is too restrictive. I have to say it's not restrictive enough. All short-term rentals should require a license. All short-term rentals should require that someone be on site or at least nearby to handle complaints. Financial penalties should be swift and severe for violations. We should be able to shut down the building across the street from me for multiple and frequent parties that exceed any occupancy regulations and have resulted in fights and gunfire. This short-term rental ordinance needs teeth. The police need to be authorized to empty these places out when there are problems. It's also pretty transparent that short-term rentals operated by owners who don't have a license are costing the city money. Greed is not an excuse to disrupt neighborhoods and destroy the quality of life we strive for. Thank you for this opportunity to vent my frustration. The city has the right to regulate short-term rentals, and it should do so in a forceful and orderly manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Jonathan?
Thank you. My name is Jonathan Bro. I'm the zoning committee chair of the Washington Square West Civic Association. Our community and the Civic Association were generally not supportive of short-term rentals, and we believe that the current process is appropriate, as there should be careful scrutiny of Airbnbs or short-term rentals and strong input from the community, especially in residential neighborhoods. Wash West is has large scale of residential types, including Trinities, walk-ups, and so forth. And these units types make great Airbnbs. Unfortunately, for each one of these Airbnbs, the community and the city at large loses a permanent resident, so an apartment or a house or so forth. And at a time when all we're hearing about is a housing crisis and that we're seeing, less ability for people to find apartments and houses, we think the Airbnb and limited lodging just exacerbates this problem. Specific to the problems of Airbnbs, as mentioned previously, the concerns of loud parties, concerns of trash pickup. Again, we have a lot of small streets and we have people dropping off they're dropping off and picking up, or cleaners blocking the streets. We have doctors who live on the streets who've been unable to leave their streets in emergency situations because of cars blocking them on the streets. And in the worst case was in September of 2021, we literally had not just gunfire, but a gun battle at 13th and South Street, where more than 40 shell casings were found, where some folks had rented an Airbnb for a party and it got out of hand. With regards to things that could possibly be done, I think the city is a bunch of different types of neighborhoods, obviously. And so possibly, a consideration of an overlay for certain residential districts, that would allow short-term limited lodging or short-term rentals could be appropriate for various districts. Or I think that Airbnbs and short-term rentals are a different enough product type that they might even want to carry their own zoning classification, so that you would you'd have RSA 5LL or something like that, so that there's a zoning classification that specifically allows for short-term rental. And we understand that process of changing zoning is difficult. My neighborhood right now is actually remapping, so it's something that if the time is spent with the neighborhood and the council person can be accommodated, and then you can end up with a situation where folks in that neighborhood, if they are supportive of Airbnbs, then they can have the Airbnbs in the areas they want, and the sections that in the parts of this town that don't want Airbnbs, then they can keep the current process where you need to go through the ZBA for variance. I will comment that a lot of the problems right now is probably the ZBA. I mean, it's in a 6-month wait is really just an untenable situation, which has anything specifically to do with the ordinance, but is a problem with the process currently. And of the people that presented, I would think that who are the Airbnb owners, it seemed like all three of them had potentials that within our neighborhood would have the potential to be approved. I can't speak to the specifics of it, so I'm just saying when we hear from operators that do operate Airbnbs properly and aren't otherwise taking viable residences away from the neighborhood, that is something that we would support. And thank you for allowing me to test for my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Is Mr. Fontana prepared to testify?
I believe support is having trouble getting through to Mr. Fontana, so
we're calling him in now.
Okay, perfect.
Hello? Hello?
Mr. Montana?
Yes.
Montana, yeah, it's you're welcome to testify.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. I'm in a hospital at the moment, so my reception's not outstanding. Well, thank you, and thank you, members of the committee. And I'll be pretty brief and straightforward. So I'm testifying here. My name is Matthew Fontana. I'm a member of the executive board of the Center City Residents Association. I'm testifying today on behalf of the CCRA to provide the CCRA's position with regard to regulations that were put forth that help to govern the use of Airbnbs across the city. And I spoke with our executive team last night, and what they wanted me to convey today is that CCRA is actually very pleased with the ordinance that was put forth. CCRA, since that ordinance has been put forth, has found a marked decrease in the number of complaints that we have gotten about Airbnb usage, and they would run the gamut, abuse from noise to too many people in a home, to sometimes destruction of property, things like that. But we have seen a marked decrease in those complaints. And so the CCRA's position is, because things have improved, not to change anything. And, we're looking to see the ordinance remain largely as is. And so that's the full scope of my testimony today, unless anyone has any particular questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Fontana. I'll ask the members of the committee if you have any questions or comments for this panel.
Yeah,
Councilmember Thomas.
Yes, this is Councilmember Thomas. Just wanted to again thank this panel for their testimony, their perspective. This is the information that we need. This is why we have these conversations, so we can figure out what is the best way to assure that we're servicing the people of Philadelphia. So just wanted to thank this panel as well for offering perspective. It's very much appreciated, and thank them for representing their neighborhoods and fighting for their communities.
Thanks, Councilmember Thomas. Hearing no further questions from members for this panel, and there being no other panels to testify, we will take a brief break to connect members of the public that wish to testify on the resolution before the committee today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Golden, will you please call the first public commenter we have to testify this morning on the resolution before the committee today?
The name of our first commenter is Brian Anderson.
Mr. Anderson?
Okay. How you doing, guys? My name is Brian Anderson, and I'm Brian Anderson, and I'm a super host. I had missed the majority of the meeting. I didn't get the link that get me to it, but I just had something that I wanted to state, and hopefully that it'll touch the hearts of the people. I'm a super host. I have about 3 units, and these units help to fuel my life. I know a lot of the changes had hurt us. Some people where they couldn't rent, or sometimes you have those bad apples that spoil the bunch. But as far as being a super host in the Airbnb community, I don't have a bad review, and I take this thing seriously as if I'm my own hotel. Warren Buffett had bought Coca-Cola years ago for about $400 million, right? He bought stocks in the company. And with him doing that, what wound up happening was it was already a great company. So what he did was he raised the price just $1, right, to make things happen. So it wouldn't be catastrophic to the bottom line. A lot of things that goes on in the Airbnb, and again, sometimes the bad apples does spoil the bunch. But if we weren't able to host with people and have these beautiful experiences, and me being a super host, I don't have a bad review on my record at all. It would be catastrophic if I wasn't able to do it, or if I wasn't able to have this. It would kill my income, and it would hurt my family in the long run. When Warren Buffett bought Coca-Cola, he raised the stock $1. I'm not sure if it's an issue of the dollar, because Airbnb takes out for city wage taxes and Philadelphia taxes and things of that sort. I'm just trying to give my testimony of how great Airbnb has been to me and my family and my life. And if it's something that was to shut it down or you wouldn't be able to rent out, it would, everything would collapse. I mean, the property owners would collapse. If you're doing renting through a leasing company, that would collapse because you wouldn't be able to make the revenue to provide for your family, right? Because this thing is about getting wealth for your family and taking care of your family. So I don't want to talk too long, but my experiences that I had on Airbnb has been nothing but great experiences. Now, I know some people, the younger guys, they may be having parties in different states and things like that. But if you have the right security footage in your Airbnb, you can avoid that for people destroying your property or making things to where uncomfortable for the city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and also yourself as being a host. So I come today to say Airbnb has changed my life. It'd be catastrophic to my bottom line if I wasn't able to do it, or if they changed the rules to where basically nobody could do it, or they made it so difficult to do. So my advice was, well, maybe what the city of Philadelphia should do is maybe come up with a method to where, hey, if we have to pay an extra $3 or $10, it goes towards the city to make everything comfortable, or we have to make sure that we have the security cameras at our units to make things where they need to be. Like whenever you go into my units, it's a Ring camera, but it's also a camera in the living room. But my instructions say, please unplug the camera for your privacy whenever you walk in so you can see the people and greet the people, have the customer service with the people, and have great experience. Again, I have no bad reviews with Airbnb. I only get good reviews, and I never had a problem with any of my tenants to stay in. I hope that touched somebody, and I hope that this thing doesn't get too difficult to where, we have to shut down, because it really helps provide for my family, and I'm pretty sure it helps everyone's family. And I thank you for your time, and I appreciate it. Thank you for my testimony.
Sorry, the next witness is Bruce Williams.
Hello. I just wanted to say thank you for Airbnb and working with the city and things like that. My question is, I just wanted to get a little bit more clarity on the code, the resolution they're trying to implement, which is the 230112. Just looking to get clarity, and also when will it go into effect? And that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Mr. Golden, next commenter.
The next person signed up to comment is Joyce James.
Good morning. My name is Joyce James. I'm a lifelong and voting resident of Philadelphia. I attended Girls High School, Community College of Philadelphia, and retired from teaching in Philadelphia public schools about 12 years ago. I'm also a superhost with Airbnb. Resolution number 230112 has crippled my attempts to augment my retirement income and improve my quality of life and maintain my home in good repair. I cannot here right now go into the details of all the issues. Some people who spoke in the first group talked about some of them, but I started March 25th, 2022, this process, and with an online meeting with LNI because I was out of town at the time. I've also contacted and received help from council member Catherine Gilmore Richardson. She referred me to another council member whose name I can't recall, who also was helpful, and finally to David Cellini from LNI. I've made at least 4 trips to the Municipal Services Building, spent countless hours on telephone calls and trying to manage that Eclipse system, which is the PITS. That Eclipse system, it was so difficult for me to try to manage, and I really wanted to give up just trying to deal with the Eclipse system, but that's a conversation for another day. But I do think that when you go to the Municipal Services Building, a city employee should be able to help you with your problem and not constantly refer you back to an online system. But anyway, I spent money on a lead paint inspection that I had done, paid $100 in fees at MSB for something else. I cannot afford the investment of getting a zoning variant, which may or may not be approved, and that also has been addressed by other people, that's a problem. I do not believe that this resolution should apply to a person who is renting out space in the home where they live. I do not feel as though I should be placed in the same category as someone coming into the city, turning much needed, moderately priced housing into unregulated boutique hotels. I understand that it definitely needs regulation, as people have spoken about the problems that brings to a neighborhood. But then there is the human side of this story, and that is that I'm not here. First of all, I'm not here to defend Airbnb. I'm not here on behalf of Airbnb. I'm not even sure that the way they operate now is something I would support. But the original intent of people helping people, not just to find a reasonably priced short-term rental, but to engage with the people where you're visiting. I feel like I'm an ambassador for Philadelphia. I'm an African-American woman. And a stay at my house gives people from all over the world and from other races a chance to interact with a Black woman that sometimes they might never have met a Black person before in their life. This is a chance for them to see my home, how I live, to see my neighborhood and how well my neighbors and I get along, a chance to promote peace and understanding. No hotel can offer that. No impersonal, unregulated boutique hotel offers that. And the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection should not make it difficult or impossible for our citizens to offer that goodwill to the world. As Councilman Thomas mentioned earlier that the city wants to be friendly to business, and that's true. I agree with that. But there should be a very strict difference between business and these boutique hotels downtown that are causing problems and a person who lives in the space that they're renting out. There's a big difference. I live in this neighborhood. I'm going to be sure that the people who come in here are decent and that there aren't any unnecessary problems. So just don't lump what I'm doing in with these little unregulated boutique hotels. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Jones.
James.
Next commenter.
The next commenter signed up to testify is Bonita Cummings.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good day. My name is Bonita Cummings, and I am the Director of Story Mansion Community Concern. I'm an elected committee woman in the 28th Ward and a member of the Philadelphia Citywide RCO Coalition. Good day, Chairman Driscoll and members of the committee. I'm here in reference to resolution number 230112, the Committee of Licenses and Inspection. So good day, Chairman Driscoll and members of the Committee on Licenses and Inspection. On February 3, 2023, a letter expressing concerns regarding short-term rentals visitor accommodation license was sent to every council member, the mayor, state and federal officials, and Ann Fadulin and Eleanor Sharp of City Planning. We don't get much time to be comprehensive in our testimony, so I first want to thank Council Member at Large Sharon Vaughn for acknowledging receipt of our letter that expressed concerns of the damaging impact short-term rentals and visitor accommodation license will have. Anything possible, housing, short-term rentals, Airbnbs, etc., can be put into a neighborhood or community. However, just because you can don't mean you should. Resolution number 230112 is meant to be interpreted as if it is about balance and equity for people of color. However, resolution number 230112 and bill number 210081, which was signed June 23, 2021, actually promote poverty onto the most vulnerable residents of the city of Philadelphia, being young Black women and immigrants, etc. It is young Black women and old women who go to work in housekeeping in hotels around the city and county, and not middle-class white women. Short-term rentals impact the hotel industry and will affect their livelihood. The responsibility of determining short-term rental and visitor accommodation use has been given to RCOs. RCOs are volunteers and should not have the responsibility of making hodgepodge decisions as to where these places go. This is a major, major economic decision impacting with devastation the financial welfare of vulnerable, young and old, mostly women, and creating abandoned hotel buildings, which many commercial properties due to COVID are now vacant. This should be a more comprehensive decision. Chairman Bergman of the zoning board will be forced to oversaturate blocks with transient short-term use properties, causing major disruptions in family life and residential blocks. Once one is allowed, the attorneys will argue that the block has one, and how can we deny another one, on and on. Therefore, we are respectfully requesting the mayor, city council, state and federal officials, licenses and inspections commissioner, planning commission, zoning board, and the hotel industry and unions to call for a cease or moratorium of the zoning variance process for visitor accommodation license short-term rentals until such time as we can get a comprehensive plan. We want follow-up and look forward to a response for our request before it is too late. The communities understand that the need for business and that people go into business, but what we don't have is the ability to become licensed inspection, regulate these processes, and again, most importantly, they impact from an economic standpoint the ability for young women, those that haven't been able to go to college and get degrees and that utilize the hospitality industry as a means of supporting their families. We become saturated in our blocks, residential blocks, with excessive permissions or granting approvals of these types of short-term rental properties. So we ask that you cease right now this zoning process that has RCOs having to hodgepodge 10, 15, 20 of these properties into residential blocks or even into a geographical boundary. It can become oversaturated and it can cause major financial difficulties, particularly for our young women who need their hotel jobs. So I thank you for allowing me to have a voice today.
Thank you, Ms. Cummings. Our next commenter.
The next person that signed up is Albert Munster.
Well, thank you. My name is Albert Munster, and I'm a member of the board of the Society Hill Civic Association, and I'm here not to speak for the association, although what I have to say will be the result of conversations with other members of the board and certainly with my neighbors. I must say that after attending quite a few PSA 3 meetings with the 6th and 9th District Police, the existence of these Airbnbs or short-term rental properties are a cancerous intrusion in our neighborhoods. And I support Councilman Squilla's proposed ordinance with all of its restrictions, and I think perhaps the restrictions should go further, and the immediate attention to violations should be just that, immediate. You'll have to excuse me if I sound a bit disjointed. I've not written anything down. But again, these short-term rentals are pernicious. They tend to drive the middle class out of our community. And from what I've heard of those who've testified, for the most part, they seem to be people who have made very poor business decisions and in a ghoulish sense are trying to make good on their decision by using their properties as Airbnbs. So I support the legislation and would like to see it made even firmer and again with more immediate enforcement. Okay, council members, thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Munster. Our next commenter.
Mr. Chair, our next commenter is Michael Greer.
Good morning, committee members, and thank you for your time. My name is Michael Greer. My wife and I own an RSA 1 zone property on East Arizona Street in District 7. We purchased this property as a second home 5.5 years ago to give us a chance to enjoy and experience the rejuvenation of the city of Philadelphia. Our primary residence is in northeastern Pennsylvania, closer to where we work, but we do want to continue to be a short-term rental host in Philadelphia, which we have done since December 2017 with 0 issues or complaints. We enjoy our time in Philadelphia. The culture, the restaurants, the sports are key highlights. Having the second home has given us an opportunity to enable our friends and family to stay in Philadelphia. And we also have permitted at no cost other families to stay in this 3-bed, 3-bath property while supporting medical treatments at our tremendous hospitals. We also open our property for our neighbors for their use when they have families visiting, as the closest hotels to our locations are several miles away. By staying in our second home, our neighbors can have visitors stay very close by as well. We care about our neighbors and our neighborhood. We certainly do not want nor endorse any trouble or disruption at our property. And while we are not in Philadelphia full-time as our primary residence, for us, it's still home. It's critically important that we treat this resolution fairly and permit operations in RSA 1 zoning. Being able to have our RSA 1 property, which we own as a short-term rental, will enable us to continue to enjoy the city, enable us to give back to others, and help us to continue to support the rejuvenation of Philadelphia. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Greer. Next commenter.
The next person that signed up to comment is Kristen Caron.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify. By restricting short-term rentals with the ordinance implemented in January, the city is hurting visitors, residents, and itself. Rental income is important for my livelihood. I don't represent a large real estate corporation. Like other members of the public who have testified, I'm a small business owner. I own a couple of investment properties in District 8 in the Northwest. The income that I was earning from short-term rentals was vital to my livelihood and my retirement. I'm a highly rated Airbnb host. Many of our guests are grandparents, parents, and siblings who want to see their family. They stay in the Northwest to be near their family members. They appreciate a clean, comfortable Airbnb as a home away from home. We've had no problems with any parties or any other disruptions in our neighborhood. We know our neighbors, we treat them with respect, and we feel that we offer a good service for the guests that stay with us. Other Philadelphia residents rely on short-term stays for accommodation for a number of reasons. They might be moving between long-term rentals, or perhaps they can't afford long-term rentals. Myself, I stayed in Airbnbs for a number of months while I was looking for a home to buy. So it was a very convenient way to learn more about the various neighborhoods in the city. So the city is hurting these residents by making it more difficult for them to find affordable, flexible housing options. It would be too expensive for me personally to have stayed in a hotel. during the several months that I was getting familiar with the city. Lastly, the city is hurting itself by effectively closing down the majority of short-term rentals by imposing a complicated, time-consuming, and expensive rezoning process. The city cuts off a steady stream of tax revenue. Many tourists who come to Philadelphia need affordable accommodation. Expensive center city hotels are not an option for some visitors. With this ordinance, the city is pushing visitors to stay in neighboring counties where more affordable hotels and motels are plentiful. The city not only loses that valuable hotel tax revenue, it also loses revenue from restaurants and ancillary services that people would find in the counties. They're not going to eat in restaurants in Philadelphia necessarily if they're staying outside the city. I have no problem registering my property and obtaining a rental license as I have done. I do have a problem with a poorly considered and implemented process that arbitrarily impacts my livelihood, the community, and the city as a whole. I ask that you support a short-term rentals by removing the rezoning requirement from the short-term rental process. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Karen. Next commenter.
Our next commenter is Lakia Thompson.
Hello, my name is Lakia. I'm a registered nurse. I have lived in the city of Philadelphia all my life. I have been a registered nurse for the last 18 years, and my husband and I have decided to purchase a property. It's a 3-story multi building with 2 apartments and a store in the Brewerytown section. It was an abandoned building, and we decided to try to help uplift the upcoming neighborhood by purchasing the building and fixing it up and starting the Airbnb and putting a store downstairs. Since then, we've been an Airbnb owner since 2018. If we had no complaints, I think, if anything, we have uplifted the neighborhood. We frequently get the neighborhood clean. We keep our storefront clean. We clean the block. We have made very friendly, neighborly suggestions. We clean the alleyways. I have also employed young women in my business, which goes against what someone actually said about us taking jobs from young women. I actually employed a young African-American woman who actually cleans my Airbnb between every guest. And since then, she has actually started her own cleaning business. So now she's her own business owner, and she actually cleans Airbnbs all over the city. So my business has actually helped someone else grow a business. During COVID, we actually just gave the Airbnb out to any doctors or nurses or any healthcare professionals that wanted to stay there rent-free. And during this time, since my building is now multi-focused, I can't think of the name, but I am actually not in the Airbnb business right now because of this new variant they have, and I have to sit in front of licenses inspections to get rezoned, and I've been waiting for about 3 months to get an appointment with L&I. So I am now actually just letting travel nurses or any travel healthcare professional actually rent the building at a much lower cost. This has impacted my family because I'm a nurse. My children don't actually qualify for a lot of the college grants and things like that. So I'm actually saving for my children to get for their college fund and so that they can have a future. So these variances and these new rules that you guys have put out is really impacting my family and making it harder for us to save and make sure that our children have a better future. So I'm hoping that there's something that can be done with the new rules and the new regulations that can help everybody, the neighborhood, the city, the Airbnb owners, come up with a better solution. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. The next presenter.
The next person signed up for public comment is Louis Baum.
Yes, hello. My name is Louis Baum, and I thank you for this opportunity. I'm a member of the 46th Ward Democratic Committee, RCO, and the Citywide RCO Coalition. While many people represented by these groups would concur with the views I present, they are my own. The whereas parts of Resolution 230112 speak eloquently to the concerns about tourism enhancing city revenue and addressing the desires of those who want to run Airbnbs. But for me, my neighbors, and many Philadelphians, the issue is the livability, safety, stability, and visibility of our communities. We are the residents, taxpayers, and voters who have chosen to live in the row houses and twins and apartments of Philadelphia's low-density residential communities. We ask for revisions to current law to better allow enforcement of present requirements, such as owner occupancy. We ask for proactive enforcement of those requirements. And we ask for a documented process to reliably engage the city for action when neighbors have a problem with safety, nuisance, and violations. Finally, we ask for the enforcement for non-owner occupied properties that may or may not use a licensed booking agent. The problem is not just bad actors. Every building unit that becomes a short-term rental property is one less home ownership or one less long-term apartment available for use. This lowers availability and raises prices. Please recognize that well-to-do areas may have the time and resources to deal with these issues, but the less well-to-do areas need your help to preserve the integrity and functioning of their neighborhoods. This means an active city government dealing with the bad actors. Many residents do not want short-term occupancies in our neighborhoods at all, but others accept what is already the law, allowing for homeowner occupants to sometimes rent a room and the occasional traditional supervised bed and breakfast to keep historic houses viable and enjoyable. The line needs to be brightly drawn to prevent multiple properties in an area from being taken over for short-term rental, and needs to exclude the people who are running multiple properties as a primary business. This is especially true in neighborhoods undergoing gentrification, because it is obvious that the conversion of properties to short-term rentals drives long-term neighbors out. Many Philadelphia properties have been purchased by outsiders and corporations. The disruption of a home ownership and the incursion of short-term renters destabilizes our communities, changing them from places of mutual support and caring to commercial enterprises. The well-known problems of noise, nuisance, and lawlessness ruin neighborhood integrity and require the undue effort on the part of neighbors to attempt resolution. The fundamental question is, should one owner have the right, whether it is by law or via city inaction, to repurpose one or more properties such that the direction and character of a neighborhood is permanently altered, despite objections of those who have invested their lives in those neighborhoods? The non-owner occupied short-term rentals are illegal under Philadelphia code. Make no mistake, this is not a recent change. About 8 years ago, Philadelphia began to allow homeowner occupants to rent a room in the limited lodging program. More detailed license requirements became effective last year. The required reporting for this program has brought to light what everyone knew, that there are quite a number of illegal operations However, the requirement in the code preventing these operations in low-density residential neighborhoods has been on the code for years. This reflects the will of the people who elect our city government. There are many complaints about delays at L&I and the ZBA. This is a problem across all users of those organizations. These problems need to be fixed. Like many other causes for a ZBA backup, the short-term rental backup would be reduced if the ZBA accurately enforced the unnecessary hardship requirement according to code. Then people would not purchase properties at inflated prices because they feel a good chance of getting a variance for whatever they want to do. The details of any new legislation are too complex to dive into here, but our communities stand ready to help where it counts. We stand ready, and I stand ready to assist the city with what should be in any new regulations before a bill is submitted. That's when it counts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Baum. Our next commenter.
The next person signed up to comment is Marianne Petrus Gilbert.
Hello, my name
Morning.
is Marianne. I am a host in District 5. I just want to say a few things about what makes Airbnb and short-term rental special for me and why I think it's important that we keep this in Philadelphia. First off, I get to meet people from all over the world, all kinds of backgrounds, all ways of life, and this alone has expanded my family's knowledge and appreciation of the diversity of everyone in this world, which I think is very important right now. It allows me to spend more time at my home with my family, and I'm a widowed single mom. So it's important that I be here. I'm sometimes the first impression that people get when they come to Philadelphia, and I'm not going to lie, we don't have the best impression on people. A lot of the first questions that I get when people are booking are, how safe is it? And I have to tell them that my neighborhood is incredible. We have such a tight community. All of my neighbors, blocks away, have stayed, hosted their families so that they can come and visit because they don't have the room. I actually live and work in this 1880s wool mill, which is amazing historic building, and have the proper everything to be doing this because, I've got the CMX and all that stuff. But I feel that a lot of bad hosts out there have made it not a favorable situation for the rest of us. Some of the other things that I would just like to highlight is that I actually live here. So I meet every single one of the guests that come to my house. I greet them. I give them recommendations on where to get the best cheesesteak, in my opinion, where to go shopping, the historical sections to go visit, what they should see, what they don't have to bother seeing if they're not interested. I've hosted families for college visits and graduations, births of babies, weddings, funerals, cancer treatments. I mean, everything across the board I've hosted. I have not hosted parties. I don't have people throwing trash. I don't have people parking illegally and doing these things that people are complaining about. I have heard of these people. My husband's a contractor, my current husband. He's downtown repairing a lot of these bad host properties and tells me of the horror stories that these people are doing. They're not there. They're not available. They don't care what happens, just get the next guest in. And that is not what 90% of the hosts here are doing. And I think that the legislation, while it's necessary, I fully support regulating this because those are the people that are giving all of us a bad name, and most of us are doing right. Most of us are doing our best to make the best of this city and show the best of everything that we have to offer, as opposed to just trying to make an extra $5,000 a month on top of multi-millions that most of these bad hosts are doing. They're just buying properties, and these are the people I think that you need to be regulating. And now I'm starting to go off, and I'm going to just end it there and say thank you very much for your time. thank you for considering the good hosts and maybe making it a little bit easier for us to get these licensing, because I know there's a lot of us that are still waiting for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Marianne. Our next commenter.
Mr. Chair, our final person signed up to comment is John Thomas.
Good morning.
Morning.
Can you hear me? Hi, my name is John Thomas. Among other things, I'm a lifelong born and raised resident in Philadelphia. In Hunting Park is where I spent most of my days, not in the playground. As a teen, I went in and served in the Air Force, and I returned back to Philadelphia to start a nonprofit in my community that was very successful for years. Worked with the Rendell administration to bring the $100 million Empowerment Zone grant to the city as staff, and as a volunteer writing that particular grant. Very successful in bringing it and helping revitalize underserved areas of the city. I'm proud of the work that I did. In 1998, I went out to become my own business owner, became a consultant, and I started my company in 2002. And, in all of those years, I never needed any support whatsoever in developing my business, growing it, having people working with me together in different community projects. And then in 2015, I was fortunate. I'd been in San Francisco working with a lot of startup owners, including folks that work at Airbnb, and learning about this shared housing, short-term rental community. And in 2014, that there was a lot of buzz to bring the Pope to the Philadelphia area. There was a whole lot of conversations back then with City Council about where these people, they're expecting millions of guests, and where were they going to stay? And that actually sparked in me as an entrepreneur to bring together a concept, not like some of the other short-term rentals that you've heard about, but another version of short-term rental called rental arbitrage, where I didn't have the capital to buy properties, but I had permission from city owners to use their properties and lease them and put them on the platform. That was in 2015. And since 2015, we were able to take, 1 3-bedroom unit and expand to 8 3-bedroom units, all within the Chinatown area, next to the convention center. And we were very profitable, bringing in at least $25,000 to $30,000 a month, and helping, but paying also rent between $1,800 and $2,800 a month to those owners. So besides the revenue being paid to owners for those properties usage, taxes and all that were being paid to the city. And we were able to, also profit as a company. Now, just so you get clear, when I talk about my company, I'm actually talking about me. I am a one owner limited liability company. That opportunity was provided for me as someone who grew up, only knowing jobs, only knowing that I could have, work for someone else. And when I got the opportunity to start my company, I was very proud to be independent. I was very proud to be able to earn an income. And, I joined the organizations like the Philadelphia Convention Bureau, the Center City Bureau, you name it, all the different associations to be a proud representative of my company. Now, as many of you have heard other guests and hosts talking about their business, we've had over 400 positive reviews. We're on all the platforms, Vrbo, Airbnb, TripAdvisor, all positive reviews. And, operating 8 3-bedroom units, we opened our property up to all the type of guests that you've already heard of, people from all over the world, and we hired our part-time staff. We paid contractors. We recycled dollars into local communities by purchasing products. I know Target and Home Depot have a lot of the revenue of my company, right? And as we all know, in 2019, that pandemic shutdown severely impacted our business model. We went from having 8 units that we could operate to having to reduce down to 2 and barely keeping up with the rent. And, we were forced to give up our 6 leases. Bookings were all canceled. Tens of thousands of dollars of losses with furniture that we had to give away pretty much in storage. It impacted my company and my personal reputation. I can no longer rent from these building owners due to the reduced revenue, and we no longer, have those partnerships. I also now have emergency SBA loans that I didn't have before that are now coming due, and there's little to no revenue from the short-term rental that was anticipated. We have not rebounded from that pandemic, and the revenue is still not with us. And since the zoning process was even first talked about and delayed several months, even then we still didn't qualify because our buildings are RMX3, or so they don't qualify as commercial units. We've helped contribute making this city a World Heritage City. We helped this city win the 2026 MLB All-Star Game with our hosting. We've helped to encourage the 2026 FIFA World Cup. These are all things done by people like myself and others that you've heard of who have been community partners to this industry and to the city. So as you know, there's a statement that you all may have heard: don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The legislation you have put in place and the hindrances that it's caused have effectively knocked off 90% of operators such as myself from these platforms with the difficulty of this licensing and unnecessary process. The STR process started back in 2015 when City Council approved this entire city as a Airbnb eligible city. You're one of the only cities that were able to do that, and it encouraged a lot of people, including bad actors, to come into the environment and take over properties. However, there are many of us that have, worked our behinds off to keep our businesses clean, to pay people a livable wage, and continue to maintain a good community partnership. And again, these communities are my communities. I was born and raised here. I still live here. The other thing I would like to say, STR hosts are not licensing experts. We're not expediters. And as you heard, as many of us, we've been forced to do emergency triage to try to recover from our lost revenue. And having the time to spend to try and go through, like the woman shared, just the Eclipse system alone, it's been a hindrance. And some of us have just said, forget it. We just don't have the ability to do it. I personally, again, I'm proud of the fact that I've been able to pivot. I still have my coaching practice to fall back on, but it is not as much revenue as I need. And I personally have had to resort to 12 hours of Lyft and Uber driving to stay afloat. Developers in the city are taking over every square inch of land and are given the keys to the kingdom in the city through tax abatements and other financial incentives. And although we are an industry that's barely new, I mean, if you understand that this entire industry was just created in 2008 with three, broke, students who rented their apartment and laid an air mattress out, and now they're billionaires running Airbnb. So to have the opportunity to deal with this issue effectively, and I have some recommendations that I would make, but I first have to ask the committee to really think through, what's the, when these issues of parties and other dangerous incidents, and again, I know that throughout the city, there are complaints for many different reasons. And again, there are many reasons why businesses leave, many reasons why residents leave, one being the large gun violence issue we have, but that's, again, not an L&I issue. But I would ask, was the real research done to identify the actual problem? These parties happen because people actually lie when they go on these platforms. They lie to the owners and the hosts when they communicate their intentions. And even if we took all the steps to vet guests, we still cannot stop those who have bad intentions. And again, as any business owner, that's given all of our best efforts. Now, having said that, I will give these recommendations to the committee. First of all, thank you for finally reaching out to the community at large and looking at this problem holistically. And I think we need to continue to do that. In the past, the city has created oversight boards when there are issues of police violence, police brutality, other issues that needed to be addressed in the city. And I think that there's a need for an oversight board that would include hosts, other agencies, and SDR reps, as well as government officials that could sit down and really work through these issues to deal with all of the categories that apply to short-term rentals. There's a lot of ignorance that's out there about what a short-term rental is. Everybody calls it an Airbnb, but there are people who aren't on Airbnb. So again, we need to know more before we do more. And the more we know, the better we can address the issue and address the problems. Licensing needs to be appropriate to the size of the operation of the operator. You know, as the woman shared, if I'm in my house, sharing my house with my 2 bedrooms, I should not be considered the same as a Sonder or Lyric operating a hotel operation within a 30-unit building. But the licensing requirements similar, almost the same. And so again, we need licensing appropriate to the size of the operator. And right now you have 2 operators or 2 licensing options, and there needs to be several more categories or even subsets before you close the door. And again, eliminating some of the undue hardship of getting through that process, and also assigning additional staff for the 90% of us who still haven't gotten our say. And the last but not least, again, L&I enforcement needs to happen when issues arise appropriate to the incident. Again, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, for someone complaining about a trash issue is not the same as a gun violence issue. And again, we all need to look at it appropriately and deal with it, you know, in an appropriate response. So I would hope that this committee takes a serious look at all the conversations. And again, like I said, my business has been impacted severely. I'm not asking for anybody's handout. I'm going out here and doing what I need to do as an entrepreneur to keep my business alive. And I would love to be able to still host guests in my home with the rooms that I have without, you know, this undue licensing that has been put in place. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas, for your testimony. Are there any questions or comments from the members of the committee? There being no further questions from members of the committee and no other witnesses to testify on resolution number 230112, I will ask if there's anyone else present in this hearing whose name we have failed to call and that wishes to offer testimony on the resolution being considered today. Hearing none, I want to thank the panels and the witnesses for their participation today. We value your opinions. I now invite all panels and witnesses to please disconnect from the hearing before we conclude the business before the committee today. We will now pause the proceedings briefly as multiple participants leave the hearing. This concludes the public hearing of the committee. Any other comments from members of the committee?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just want to commend you for your chairmanship of this hearing and this worthwhile discussion. And as we all heard, there were varying ways to view this issue, but only one way that we can move forward. And I just want to thank you for being so patient. Good job.
Thank you, Leader Jones. Well, this concludes the business before the Committee on License and Inspection today. Thank you all very much for your attendance. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your leadership on this particular issue.
Thank you, Councilman Thomas.